Bring in show music, please.
Hi, I'm CNBC producer Katie Kramer. Today on Squawk Pod, President Donald Trump, a wide-ranging interview. Firing the Labor Department's data commissioner after a disappointing jobs number.
When they say that that nobody was involved, that it wasn't political, give me a break.
How he's remaking the American economy with tariffs.
But on pharmaceuticals, we'll be putting a initially small tariff on pharmaceuticals, but in 1 year, 1.5 years maximum, it's going to go to 150%, and then it's going to go to 250%.
The drawn-out public feud with the Federal Reserve Chair, Jay Powell.
Who would you replace him with? I know you watch the show occasionally, and we had an extended interview with one of the prospective replacements, Kevin Warsh. Were you watching that day, or? I
was. He's very He's very good. He's very good. Sometimes they're all very good until you put them in there, and then they don't do so good.
And eyeing a replacement, even from his own team, like National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett.
I say Kevin and Kevin. Both Kevins are very good.
You'll hear the full interview from the policy to the politics, only right here.
I got the highest vote in the history of Texas, a record that they say won't be beaten unless I run again.
Are you going to run again? The
No,
Constitution
probably not.
Plus, the rest of the news that got us squawking. That's all coming up today, Tuesday, August 5th. Squawk Pod begins right now.
Stand Becky by in 3, 2, 1. Cue it, please.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Squawk Box right here on CNBC. We're live from the NASDAQ market site in Times Square. I'm Becky Quick along with Joe Kernan. Andrew will join us a little later in the show from the Aspen Economic Strategy Group meeting. Some really big gains yesterday. The major averages all bouncing back yesterday from Friday's losses. You had the Dow, the S&P, and the NASDAQ all putting in their best performance in more than 2 months. You have to go back to May 27th, I believe, to see performances like this. You saw the Dow futures. The Dow was up by 1.3%. The S&P was up by 1.5%, and the NASDAQ was up by almost 2%. That prompted a Truth Social post from President Trump saying, "Good day in the stock market, but there will be many more days like this. America is very rich again and stronger than ever before." We're going to be speaking with the president. In the meantime, check out Treasury yields. You will see right now that the 10 years at 421, the 2-year at 370.
San Francisco Fed President Mary Daly now says the time is close, nearing for interest rate cuts. In an interview with Reuters, Daly cited a softening labor market and no signs of persistent inflation driven by tariffs. He says he's generally of the mindset that each upcoming Fed meeting is a live meeting at which rates could be cut, and 2 quarter-point cuts seem to be an appropriate amount of recalibration. I don't know whether she means this year or in total. Daly also said a rate cut at next month's meeting, though. Can't say it's a guarantee, so she didn't. She said, not a guarantee, but you never would anyway. But
yeah, you don't know. We see what
like
happens. There's a lot of data that comes between now and then, but the markets are certainly betting that it's a much more likely scenario than it was just 5 days ago. India says that it is being targeted by the United States and the European Union over its imports of Russian oil. This follows President Trump threatening India with much steeper tariffs. In a statement late yesterday, India's foreign ministry said that the country began importing Russian oil only after what it called traditional supplies were diverted to Europe when the Russia-Ukraine war broke out. The foreign ministry said at that time the U.S. was actively encouraging Indian imports from Russia in order to try and help balance the global energy market. Remember, they didn't want prices going up too much. And so that's kind of why they were doing it. So you put these sanctions on, but you kind of wink and nod at what's happening in terms of India. By the way, China also imports a huge amount of Russian oil. India also accused the U.S. and the EU of hypocrisy for trading with Russia, even though U.S. bilateral trade with Russia last year was only about $5 billion. For his part, President Trump said on Truth Social yesterday morning that India was buying massive amounts of Russian oil, then selling much of it for big profits. The president said that he would substantially raise U.S. tariffs on India.
And India is claiming that it really had no choice after it was cut off from supplies from other areas, and said, you wanted us to do this. It seems like if you connect all the dots, We've been told that India was right on the cusp of a deal for
They were one of the
months.
first to come to the table and try and negotiate, but they've also been pretty firm in terms of...
we don't know.
They've been pretty firm in terms of not allowing farm imports, and that's
Right.
been a huge deal.
We didn't know what the
Their farmers
holdup
in favor of
was.
that, ours not.
We don't know what the holdup. Maybe that's what the holdup was.
Part of it.
But we thought it was imminent, and it didn't happen. And that's when the president decides, okay. And I don't know if this
Apparently
is,
one of the big sticking points is agricultural imports to India.
yeah, not oil. I mean, that's what I'm saying. My point is that I don't know if it's all of a sudden this is Russian oil. That's obviously something that you can use to say, all right, we're really mad, and they're doing this, and they better get it together. But we've seen that sort of that MO with some of the other places too.
Fentanyl with Canada.
Or
Much more of it comes
in
from
Europe, we were
Mexico.
close, and now I'm only 50%, and I'd be, I'm not in a good mood coming over. You see the
Some
call
mercurial
it the art of the deal,
behavior,
but you
yes.
see it at work. Sticking with trade, a senior EU official said that this is really interesting, the 15% tariff that European goods face when entering the U.S. Is all-inclusive, unlike the deals that some other countries have struck with the Trump administration. It will apply broadly to all EU exports except for steel and aluminum. However, and the EU is not celebrating that 15% rate, but considered it a good deal compared to others, but they're not putting theirs on now for 6 months, because I think they want to get it below 15 if they can.
Right, they're looking for a better deal and trying to continue to negotiate. But I think there is some question as to whether or not that's actually true. Does it apply to pharmaceuticals? Does it apply to others? Because there have been other of these 232
Totally fluid,
tariffs
yeah.
that are still questioned about some
Totally
of these
fluid,
issues.
but when she said
Pharmaceuticals definitely
when the
a big question.
the European Commission president said that
Van der Leyen.
yeah, that this is as good as it's the best we could get, and then Germany was complete carping, and France was no one's happy. So
Yeah.
I think they're hoping that they
For a
can
better
get-
deal.
I mean, it's pretty nice. 6 months. Our tariffs stay on, but they don't do anything for 6 months.
No retaliatory measures while they continue to talk.
And it's kind of sad. I feel bad. I feel bad for them. White House is reportedly preparing an executive order that could fine banks if they drop customers for what's being called political reasons. The Wall Street Journal says an order could be signed as soon as this week, though that's not a guaranteed timeline. This action follows complaints by conservatives that they've been shut out of banking services, debanked, for political or religious beliefs. The Journal says the order will also try to protect crypto companies, which faced high hurdles, it says here, to traditional financial services under the Biden administration.
The banks have complained that anything they did was because regulators kind of held them to some gray laws where they felt they could get in trouble for some of these issues too. So it's been something back to the Federal Reserve with the oversight they do, trying to go through the rules and lay those things out. But there's a lot of back and forth.
Come up with other things over the years that, depending on the administration in power at the time, guns,
Right.
with credit cards not being able to
You
be
get in
used
trouble for all kinds
for
of things.
guns,
Where you have the regulators.
fossil fuels because of the climate crisis.
Sometimes the regulators have put some pretty onerous restrictions.
Even the Federal Reserve, even the San Francisco Fed with climate stuff.
It was the Federal Reserve or the regulators for the banks who have put a lot of these things in.
DEI, I mean, take your pick, right? And don't forget the
Banks are like, wait a second, we're just doing what we're told, trying to play within the rules.
Don't forget that amazing weaponized IRS during the Obama administration under Louise, whatever her name was.
I forget.
You could if you had Patriot in your name, you were screwed. That's how bad it can get. So I'd like to say never about anything being politicized, but there's precedent for it. These government types will push the boundaries of on either side.
Yeah,
of
on
what,
either side.
of what you're able to do.
case. And then there's another stock we're keeping an eye on as well. Shares of American Eagle Outfitters. That stock surged by more than 23% yesterday after President Trump called the company's ad featuring Sydney Sweeney the hottest ad out there. The stock right now up by another 2.8%. American Eagle's shares initially rose amid the meme stock mania the day that ad campaign was announced, but they had been sliding since then amid criticism of the campaign. Some far-left critics accused the company of commenting about Sweeney's genetics, not pants. The ad is she has good genes. You can spell it G-E-N-E-S or you can spell it J-E-A-N-S. It also faced pushback for being overly sexualized.
Yeah, that's never happened before.
Somebody pointed out the same ad campaign was basically the one Brooke Shields did back in the 80s.
I think Beyonce had a gene ad too, but Brooke always has been she's an amazing person. You've seen what she was a teenager.
She grew up in my town.
She was she's a teenager.
Yeah, right.
So that's how long she's turned into. I think she's not 60 yet. I don't think, but she's
close.
Getting there. So that's how long we're talking about. I think her thing was
nothing gets between me and my Calvins.
Why don't you say it?
Yeah, nothing comes between me and my Calvins. But there was one of the moves where she's laying on the ground putting it on. That's basically the same move that Sydney Sweeney does.
Look, I don't know how many culture wars that the left can lose. This is another one. Chalk it up to another stupid move and another 90. I think it's a 90.
It's smart if you're in advertising. You're
great
looking
for
to pick up.
American
You're looking.
And
to
then
pick up
she's a
controversy.
registered Republican. And then there's also there's a video of her. She's really good with a pistol shooting. Have you seen it?
No, I didn't see that.
It's really good. She's had some practice coming up. Much more on if it's real. So we have to say that every single time.
Coming up next on Squawk Pod, a phone interview with President Donald Trump. It runs about 40 minutes. We are including the full conversation as it aired on our TV broadcast today. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Squawk Pod, and the gang's all here.
3, 2, 1, up and Andrew. Cue is Mike.
You are watching Squawk Box right here on CNBC. I'm Andrew Ross Sorkin, along with Joe Kernan and Becky Quick. I'm here at the Aspen Economic Strategy Group meeting this morning, guys. The annual event bringing together leaders, thinkers from both sides of the aisle with the goal of trying to promote evidence-based solutions to try to address the economy's most urgent challenges. It is a collection of former Treasury Secretaries here, guys. So we have Hank Paulson, Tim Geithner, Janet Yellen, Stephen Mnuchin, Larry Summers. They are all here. And then there's a whole flood of economists all talking about what's happening in the world. And we're going to be talking to so many of them. Mr. Kernan and Miss Quick, nice to see you both. How you doing, Joe?
Good. When I saw you on the monitor, I was thinking, what a great time for you to do the Scott Cohn thing, because it's somewhere where it's dark. Right. Somewhere where it's dark. You could have had some clues. I'm trying to think of some Aspen type, but you told us immediately where you were. But that's
well, we said it at the top of the show, so we kind of gave it away before
Did you
came
say
on.
it?
I did.
I need to start listening to what everybody says, Andrew. I apologize.
That would be helpful.
It sounds good, though, Andrew. And once again, there you are, sacrificing yourself for the good of the show, heading out to places like Aspen. Aspen in the summer. Colorado in the summer is like, man,
it's a hardship assignment.
You are happy to be alive in Colorado in the summer.
I have Aspen Glow stuck in my head now. It's a song by John Denver, probably his worst song. I love a lot of John Denver songs. This one I do not love, and now it's stuck in my head.
Yeah. 300 days a year, Andrew, of sunshine. Anyway, you got a great lineup.
Sunny.
It's always sunny.
Soon.
And what's cool, it could snow, and then it'd be 80 degrees in the afternoon. You'll be back Friday. So you have a lineup for us for Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday?
We got a huge lineup here tomorrow in Aspen, and then we got another big guest in San Francisco on Thursday. We'll tease that later. And then I'll see you in New York on Friday. But we've got the biggest of all big guests, as you know, at 8 o'clock this morning. So I'm excited about that. By the way, everybody here, all the Treasury Secretary, they're all planning to watch this. They're all trying to figure out what he's going to say. And so there's a lot of attention on this situation.
Big, beautiful guest, I would dare say. Probably not an overstatement on this. Okay. Yeah, it's big. We've used that a few times. It's a big, beautiful phone call. Andrew, get ready. Get ready, and we're going to have to. It's a phoner. Phoners are hard enough, and you're coming from Aspen to do the phoner.
I know.
But we're gonna work through it, and
we're gonna triangulate. We're gonna
triangulate. Exactly. now to the guests that we've been talking about all morning. President Donald Trump. Mr. President, welcome. Thanks for calling in. Wish you could be here in person, but we'll do this.
Good morning, Joe.
We've been talking about the BLS and the employment numbers all morning long. Sometimes I know you get a chance to tune in. I want to bring up a chart. I hope you can see it, or else I'll describe it to you. This is the response rate over the last 10, 12 years for the BLS household survey. It's dropped from 90% or so on time down to 60 and sometimes even lower. It's arguably the most important number we get about the economy. Yesterday, we had Wharton professor Jeremy Siegel on. Just bear with me, Mr. President, and listen to this. I know you're familiar with Wharton, but unsolicited, this is what Jeremy Siegel said yesterday about the numbers.
I'm not going to let the BLS off the hook. I mean, you talk about how to fix it. Make these questionnaires mandatory and give them a time limit to fill it out. I think the response rate's down to 60%. I mean, that's unacceptable for the most important statistic that we have. It's almost like we're sending them out, fill it out when you can. We know you like to go to the beach in the summer, so it might be a little bit late. This is just not acceptable today. We need that response rate has to go up. And when you make the biggest mistake in 50 years, why? Why wasn't there an explanation?
258,000 less in 2 months. That was the biggest revision since 1968, Mr. President. So we're in the internet age. We still can't get any instant data. We're still using snail mail to get the responses back. It is the government, after all. Antiquated, no doubt, and certainly suboptimal, but rigged? Where do you get the notion that it's rigged, or do you have any evidence there?
It is antiquated, but it's also very political. And, I had an election recently where I did very well, won every swing state, won the popular vote, won everything, all right? Won all the counties. It's, I think, 87% of the counties were Republican up. That's never happened before. And yet I had to go through hell. And just days before the election, they put out numbers that it was like the country was on fire. It was doing so well. And then they did a revision about 2 weeks later, and the revision was down by almost 900,000 jobs. You remember that? And I said, what would have happened? What would have happened if I lost? Think of it. I would have said... They gave phony numbers, and then they revised them a week and a half later.
Those were benchmark numbers, though, Mr. President. That happens. They do that. They do that twice a year, and it reconciles the monthly figures with, like, the overall numbers. And it was a big number, and obviously
the numbers were rigged. The numbers were rigged. Biden wasn't doing well. He was doing poorly. They announced these phenomenal numbers 2 days before the election. And a little bit before that, always these great numbers, and you knew it wasn't doing well. You knew prices were through the roof and inflation was terrible. The whole thing was bad. But think of it. Then they did the biggest revision, I think, in history of almost 900,000 jobs. And it turned out to be more than that because later on they did another revision. And so they gave phony numbers in order to win the election. After I won the election, I said too big to rig. But after I won the election, then they announced a downward number, in other words, to bring them back to reality. And I said, wow, supposing I would have lost, I would have blamed that, and people would have said I was a conspiracy theorist. It's crazy.
Elaine Chao was on yesterday, and I know she was, I think she was Labor Secretary for 8 years under Bush II, and she was your Transportation Secretary as well. And she said, the commissioner doesn't really even get involved with the actual minutia of putting all these things together. And there's no way that it could have been, that she could have chosen to rig these numbers to make them look bad. And these are statistical changes based on this antiquated system, and it's just a big leap to go to rigged. And then it also, Mr. President, it makes anyone you pick is going to be, critics are going to say, hey, he's picking a guy that's going to give him or a gal that's giving him the numbers that he wants. So it undermines confidence in the system to some extent. You had, according to many people, all the rights in the world to try to replace a commissioner when it's not hasn't gotten any better. but that is maybe a bridge too far, according to most people.
Well, I think when somebody says the commissioner is not involved, I don't want to get into any arguments with anybody. Why should I? She's a very nice woman.
Exactly.
But when they say that that nobody was involved, that it wasn't political, give me a break. Look, before the election, I had this massive outflow of beauty for Biden. I mean, he didn't know he was alive. And for Biden, the economy was roaring. It was a beautiful thing. And I said, there's no way this is happening. It's going the opposite direction. And 2 weeks later, they said I was right. But even if you look at the original, the ones from the other day, the numbers were very timid. And then they announced something that made them even more timid on top of it. On sort of a reporting day, I don't know why, it just seemed a little bit more important than most times when they announced these numbers.
We talked earlier that the unemployment rate is still low. It's 4.2%.
It's fine.
And the tariffs.
No, but I will say this: the numbers before the election were earth-shattering. I'm not saying these were earth-shattering.
No, I understand.
Then they announced a couple of 100,000 to make it look a little bit worse from, months before. I said, where did those numbers come from? So
for as much as you want to,
it's a highly political situation. It's totally rigged. Smart people know it. People with common sense know it. And a lot of people to keep their head under the covers. And
let's move on to this. Which number do you believe at this point? Because if you noticed, suddenly the chances of what you've wanted for months and argued for months, the chances of a rate cut soared because of these numbers. Do you not believe the current numbers because they're playing right into what you want the Fed and Jay Powell to do? They're not horrible, as you said, but perhaps with the tariffs, some businesses delayed some spending. Some consumers may have been less certain about the future. So maybe we're seeing a slight slowdown in labor, but you're going to get exactly what you want based on these numbers. Which ones do you believe? Do you not believe the revised numbers either?
It's not what I want. I don't want that. I wanted it a year ago. I wanted it a long time ago. Jay Powell is highly political, and I think, I call him too late. Jerome, too late. Powell, he's too late. He's too late always. He always has been, except when it came to lowering interest rates before the election, he did. He worked that out.
Who would you replace him with? I know you watch the show occasionally, and we had an extended interview with one of the prospective replacements, Kevin Warsh. Were you watching that day? Or
I was. He's very good. He's very good. He's very good. Sometimes they're all very good until you put them in there, and then they don't do so good. But a lot of them, I think he's a very good guy. I think I say Kevin and Kevin. Both Kevins are very good. And there are other people that are very good, too. But,
Kevin's like Karens. I don't know if that's good.
Yeah. A lot of times, they're very good. Like this character that we have in there now, Jerome Too Late Powell, he was very good. He said, sir, I'll keep interest rates so low. I'm a low interest rate person, sir. You could hardly hear him talking over the desk.
Is Warsh
somebody that worked for him, he was a big fan of his, not a fan of his, he hardly knew him, but he wanted him so badly. I did somebody a favor, I put him in there. No, he's too late. He's too late. That name will stick to him.
Can you handicap it at all? Who you're, or you won't know? When will you know? And when will you announce it?
I think the two Kevins are doing well, and I have two other people that are doing well. Look, it's in the end there are numerous people that are qualified. Everyone on your phone right now, in terms of at your beautiful studio, would be very qualified, in my opinion. You guys are better than most of the people that do it for a living. But I watched a lot actually. No, I think that it'll be one of four people.
Are the other two names?
I'm going to make the decision soon. And don't forget, we have somebody that left early, which was a pleasant surprise. We have a woman that left early. She announced 2 days ago that she's leaving, and I'm going to be announcing that very shortly, too. That will be, most likely it'll be for the 4 months, for the short period of time. But a lot of people say that when you do that, why don't you just pick the person who's going to head up the Fed? That's a possibility, too.
President Trump, you said there are four names. There are two other names that have been mentioned in the press. One is Governor Waller. The other is the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent. Are those the four that you're considering?
Well, I love Scott, but he wants to stay where he is. I'll take him off because I asked him just last night, is this something you want? Nope, I want to stay where I am. He actually said, I want to work with you. It's such an honor. I said, that's very nice. I appreciate that. But no, Scott wants to do what he's doing. He's doing a great job. and he wants to do what he's doing. So I'd just take him off. He does not want it. He likes being Treasury Secretary. He's doing a really good job. We made the greatest trade deals in the history of our country. We had to because we were being ripped off by the world. It's not like we had a choice. If we would have gotten these trade deals, if you would have had a normal president that would have just continued to allow every country in the world to rip you off, we would not have a country anymore. Your show would be off the air. There'd be nothing to look at. It would be a disaster. We were in such bad shape when I took over. Eggs had tripled in price. More than that. Everything was up, and prices are down, and it bugs me. I looked at CNN the other night, which is a failing deal. It's got no ratings, and I'm probably the only guy watching. And I watched these guys talking about, well, with Trump, prices are up. No, prices are down since I came in. Down. All prices just about, except for the price of stock. The price of stock is way up, okay? But prices are down. And if you look at energy, I'll give you an example. Joe, look at energy.
Some of them, but yeah.
Energy is way down. Energy is down to $2.20 a barrel, a gallon now for a car. It's down to a level. You're down, I guess, around $65 a barrel, but it's going down. There's tremendous energy. And if you notice, OPEC and OPEC Plus, they're drilling more. They want to drill more because I think they want me happy. Because if energy goes down low enough, Putin's going to stop killing people. That'll be nice, even though they're his own people that are dying, him and Ukraine. But Putin will stop killing people if you get energy down another $10 a barrel. He's going to have no choice because his economy stinks.
Mr. President, it's Andrew here. It's great to speak with
Andrew.
you.
Good.
I just wanted to ask you about, you mentioned tariffs. And on Sunday, you talked again about this idea of dividends for middle and lower income folks that might come off of the tariffs, meaning the revenue that's coming in from the tariffs. And I wanted you to maybe explain how that might work in practice and how you're thinking about that and the trade-offs between paying down the debt, which I thought was something you had been talking a lot about, versus sending checks out, because obviously that creates its own debt for us.
So we're taking in trillions of dollars, Andrew. If you look at Japan, we're taking in $550 billion. And that's like a signing bonus that a baseball player would get. He would get slightly less no matter how good he is, right? But they give a signing bonus of $1 million or $2 million or $20 million or whatever the hell they give today. It's so out of control. But a signing bonus. So I got a signing bonus from Japan of $550 billion. That's our money. It's our money to invest as we like. European Union, $650 billion. Think of it. And they're going to buy $750 billion worth of our energy. And they're going to do this, and they're going to do that. And by the way, they're going to open up their countries, which they've never done. Japan has never. If you did business in Japan, they would arrest you. You're not allowed to do any business. And now Japan has totally opened up their country. They're even taking our rice, which is something that nobody said was possible. But more importantly, they're taking our cars. They're taking the very beautiful Ford 150, which does very well, and I'm sure will do very well there. And other things that do very well here will also do well there. You'd be surprised at some of the great things we make. But Japan has opened up. All of these. Indonesia's opened up their country. South Korea has opened up their country. But not only opened up, and that's going to be huge business. When you open up South Korea, it's a closed country. And now all of a sudden we're allowed to sell cars into South Korea and trucks and SUVs. I mean, we're really opening it up. Vietnam is opening up their country. You know, these are all closed countries. But the EU was closed. They wouldn't take our agriculture. I said to, let me just say a prime minister, a very nice prime minister, a couple of years ago, I said, how many cars are you taking a year? Let me guess, is it one or two? She said, no, we don't take any of your cars. I said, that's right. That's not nice. I said, that's not right. That's not a nice thing, Angela. But they took none of them, and now they take all our cars, all our trucks. Everything is open, 100%. In addition, the EU is going to pay us $650 billion. We're going to round it off, actually, because of certain things, to $600 billion. And think of it. They're going to put up $750 billion. We're a rich country again. Now, these are just deals that I'm announcing. These are the biggest ones because EU is, essentially Europe. We made great deals with all of the countries, and they're being fair about it. One other thing, I mean, for your listeners that perhaps are a little bit less wealthy than some of your listeners, I'm doing something that nobody's ever done before. as you know, for 30 years, Europe has had drug prices that are, in many cases, 1/10 the cost of drugs in here. Same manufacturing plants, same everything. 1/10. I've invoked favored nations. Now, there is no favored nations clause. I've just said there is, okay, because we're not going to pay 10 times more per pill than they pay in Europe. Then that's going to have a tremendous impact on the price of medicine.
Mr. President, what kind of teeth, though, are in those investments? What kind of teeth are in those investments, meaning that would force the EU to make those investments? If they don't make those investments, what happens on the other side?
Well, then they pay tariffs of 35%. No, they brought down their tariffs. So they paid $600 billion, and because of that, I reduced their tariffs from 30% down to 15%. And a couple of countries came, how come EU is paying less than us? And I said, well, because they gave me $600 billion. And that's a gift. That's not like, a loan, by the way. That's not a loan that, 3 years comes up, we have to pay it back. There's nothing to pay back. They gave us $600 billion that we can invest in anything we want.
The deal that you
and nobody knows it, Becky. Nobody knows it because they don't know.
No, we have been trying to figure out the details on that, Mr. President. So
well,
we appreciate
there are no
the clarity on that.
The details are $600 billion to invest in anything I want. Anything.
Okay.
I can do anything I want with it. And the purpose was they've been, ripping us for so many years that it's time that they pay up, and they have to pay up. We couldn't afford to have the deficits. Look, I did something with Switzerland the other day. I spoke to their prime minister. The woman was nice, but she didn't want to listen. And they paid essentially no tariffs. And I said, we have a $41 billion deficit with you, madam. I didn't know her. I said, we have a $41 billion deficit. And you want to pay 1% tariffs. You wanted 1%. I said, you're not going to pay 1%. We lose. Because I view deficit as loss. You have some people. By the way, I think
pharmaceuticals are a big issue with Switzerland. I think.
Well, I'll go into pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
They make a fortune with pharmaceuticals, and they make our pharmaceuticals in China and Ireland and everything else. And within the next week or so, we're going to be announcing tariffs on specifically. This is a separate class than the 15% tariffs on sort of everything. These are excluded classes, I call them. I like to call them excluded, like steel, aluminum, etc.
Right, the
well,
232.
We're going to be announcing on semiconductors and chips, which is a separate category, because we want them made in the United States. And by the way, they're being made in the United States. We have the biggest in the world, as you know, from Taiwan is coming over and spending $300 billion in Arizona, building the biggest plant in the world for chips and semiconductors. But on pharmaceuticals, we'll be putting a initially small tariff on pharmaceuticals. But in 1 year,
President
1.5 years maximum, it's going to go to 150%, and then it's going to go to 250% because we want pharmaceuticals made in our country. And that's not the CHIPS Act like Biden did because he didn't know what he was doing, where they gave billions of dollars to companies that had more money than they knew what to do with.
President Trump, can I ask you about something that you're doing that's opposite of the Biden administration, too? And that's the latest deal that you've announced.
Everything.
The latest deal, though, that you're announcing with India, you're upset with the trade deal there, especially because they're buying Russian oil. The Biden administration sanctioned Russian oil, but then they kind of winked and nodded and appreciated that India and China were buying some of that oil because they were worried it would raise oil prices and thereby prices at the pump. To you, is it more important to shut down the Russians on this than to worry about oil prices?
I'm not worried about prices because we're drilling at levels that nobody's ever seen before. And what Biden did is he stopped my drilling. And then prices, if you remember that first couple of months, prices went through the roof. And he immediately said, let's go back to what Trump was doing. Let's go back to it. But by that time, they had blown it, and the energy prices were so high, and that's what caused that, and his crazy spending is what caused, by the way, the largest inflation in the history of our country was during the Biden administration. Not 48 years. They like to say 48 years. It was the largest in the history of our country, the inflation that we had during Biden, because the man obviously didn't know what he was doing. But with India, what people don't like to say about India, they're the highest tariff nation. They have the highest tariff of anybody. We do very, very little business with India because their tariffs are so high. So India has not been a good trading partner because they do a lot of business with us, but we don't do business with them. So we settled on 25%, but I think I'm going to raise that very substantially over the next 24 hours because they're buying Russian oil. They're fueling the war machine. And if they're going to do that, then I'm not going to be happy.
Yeah, a lot of deals signed, and I don't know. I thought India was imminent. I'm not sure what the sticking point is there, Mr. President. But let's just, since we don't have all day, we got to talk China.
Well, the sticking point with India is that tariffs were too high. Now, I will say this:
but
India went from the highest tariffs ever. They will give us 0 tariffs. And they're going to let
China,
us go in, but that's not good enough because of what they're doing with oil. Not good.
It looked like you were going to have a meeting, and people were talking about it with President Xi, and then you went out of your way to kind of say other people are saying. I think you even called it fake news or something. It looked like you were indicating that you were unhappy or that talks had broken down. And we've had a couple of frameworks or some positive moves. And China, you've had a lot of success with other countries. China is a big deal and a big. Not quite the elephant in the room, but certainly an important trading partner. Where does that stand? Will there be a meeting between you and President Xi? Anything planned at this point? What's the sticking point now, and how optimistic are you that we get a comprehensive
Well, I can have a meeting. We have a very good relationship, but I didn't call for the meeting. He called for the meeting. So the fake news announced Donald Trump wants a meeting with China. No, I didn't want it. No, he asked for a meeting. And I'll end up having a meeting before the end of the year, most likely, if we make a deal. If we don't make a deal, I'm not going to have a meeting. I mean, what's the purpose of meeting if we're not going to make a deal? But we're getting very close to a deal. We're getting along with China very well. I will tell you, you had a point when I had 145% tariffs on. I put in for fentanyl. I actually said to people, where are we now with China, by the way, because I kept adding more and more. They said, sir, you're up to 145%. I said, you got to be kidding. So I sort of had to bring it down a little bit. But when it was up to 145%, meaning we were doing 0 business with China, China was collapsing. I don't know if you know that. You haven't reported it if you do. But China was collapsing. China is very reliant on the United States. My relationship with him is very good. I think we'll make a good deal. It's not imperative, but I think we're going to make a good deal. But no, they had a thing that Donald Trump really wanted to go there. No, I don't. It's a 19-hour flight. It's a long flight. But at some point in the not-too-distant future, I will. And just to end this conversation in China, I have a very good relationship with President Xi. Always had, other than the COVID moment where I was very angry with him and essentially didn't want to talk to him, frankly, because, it did come out of Wuhan, in all fairness, which I was saying from the day one. I was saying I knew exactly where it came from. But that did interfere with the relationship. But no, I've had a great relationship with President Xi. We respect him a lot. They respect us a lot. They didn't respect Biden. They thought he was a numbskull. They couldn't believe he was the president of the United States, and neither can anyone else that happened.
Mr. President, on a different topic, the Wall Street Journal is reporting that you're prepping an order that they say would punish banks that discriminate against conservatives, including potentially Bank of America. I'm going to be actually talking to Brian Moynihan here later today. Can you tell us about that executive order? What's in that? And what do you think the banks have done?
Well, they did discriminate. I had J.P. Morgan Chase. I had hundreds of millions of dollars in cash. I could see if they want to, if they want to do something bad because you don't have any money and you defaulted and they took people out. But I'll give you me as an example. I had hundreds of millions. I had many, many accounts loaded up with cash. I was loaded up with cash. And they told me, I'm sorry, sir. We can't have you. You have 20 days to get out. I said, you got to be kidding. I've been with you for 35, 40 years. They said, and I mean, I had all this. I didn't know what to do with it. And I went to, and you could ask him. Maybe he's not going to admit it. So I said, I was informed by my people that we have to get out of Chase Manhattan. That's Jamie and J.P. Morgan Chase. So I said, I can't believe it. Well, I was never in this situation before. I've never had anything like it. And it's not like, gee, you defaulted on a loan. I can understand that. That's different. But there's no default. I mean, there's nothing but cash. I have a really great company. And then what happens is I call up Bank of America routinely because when I was president, this was after I got out, by the way, I call up Bank of America routinely. And I speak to him and I speak to a couple of people, and they have zero interest. Brian was kissing my ass when I was president. And when I called him after I was president, to deposit $1 billion plus and a lot of other things, more importantly to open accounts, which banks always like. They like accounts because they get interest free, the overnights and things, there are a lot of reasons for it, but they like accounts. I had hundreds of accounts, and he said, we can't do it. No, we can't do it. So I went to another one. I ended up going to small banks all over the place. I mean, I was putting 10 million here, 10 million there, did 5 million, 10 million, 12 million. I have them all over the place, the craziest thing. And it's lucky I even had them. They were doing me a favor. And that's because the banks discriminated against me very badly. And I was very good to the banks. I had the greatest economy in the history of our country when I was president. And by the way, our economy now will blow that away, and you see it happening. But our economy now, because we're a rich country again, because of our trade deals, we've become a rich country again. But no, they totally discriminate against, I think me maybe even more, but they discriminated against many conservatives. I told that story and sitting around tables with other people that were conservative or Trump supporters. I think the word might be Trump supporters more than conservative. And I believe what they did is they went to the regulators. Banks are not afraid of anything but a regulator. They're regulators and their wives. They're more afraid of their wives than the regulators. But the group they're really afraid of is bank regulators. And I believe that Biden or Kamala, and I don't think they're smart enough to do it, but the people that are surrounding the beautiful Resolute desk, the high IQ people that are radical left, I believe they told the banking commission, the bankers, that the banking regulators, do everything you can to destroy Trump. And that's what they did. And guess what? I'm president. How did that happen?
Yeah, Mr. President, you've talked about you want success, not retribution. The Justice Department now tapping a grand jury to look into the intelligence community's assessment of what was happening with Russia. Is that you have nothing to do with directing the Justice Department?
No, I have nothing to do. Pam is doing a great job. I have nothing to do with it. I will tell you this. They deserve it. I was happy to hear it. I actually read it just like you did. I have nothing to do with it. But what they did in the election, what they did in even the last election, but it was too big to rig. But what they did in the 2020 election is grotesque. I mean, that was a rigged election, 100%.
Okay, we can't relitigate that. We can't relitigate that.
No, we're back to rigging again. Well, you can use it because everyone knows it.
Yeah, we are.
You know what? A year ago, you would have been upset if I said it. Today, it's different. I say it all the time. It was a rigged election. It was 100% rigged.
We can't relitigate because it.
And I'm sure that's going to be brought up
independent sources, even your Justice Department. But then I'm bringing up Bill Barr. But even they decided that there were things that happened, but nothing that would have swayed it.
Well, they were wrong, and Bill Barr was wrong, and Bill Barr didn't investigate, and he should have. And why didn't Bill Barr give why didn't he give the Derma report? Why didn't he give that report, the stuff that's in there, that's all this stuff is coming out of it? Why didn't he give it earlier? I mean, why did it take so long to do it? And why didn't he give it? Why didn't they announce it earlier? Because it morphed. What happened is it morphed into the Biden administration, and the Biden administration buried it. So, it's too bad.
How about Texas? Now we're going to do mid-year or midterm gerrymandering based on that's going to be a quid pro quo or something with in blue states now, Mr. President. Did you?
Well, they did it to us. Those blue states that you're talking about. Somebody gave a good example. In Massachusetts, I got, I think, 41% of the vote. It's a very, blue state. And yet it's got 100% of Congress, 100%. So I got 41% or something. And yet 100% of Congress in Massachusetts. No, it shouldn't be that way. We should have a couple of Congress people, but we have none. And think of this, 100%. In Illinois, where you have probably the dumbest of all governors, Illinois, that guy is really the business is flowing out of his state. It's terrible. It's a terrible thing that Pritzker's doing. He was the black sheep of the family. They threw him out of the business. But in Illinois, what's happened is terrible, what they're doing. And you notice they go to Illinois for safety, but that's all gerrymandered. California's gerrymandered. We should have many more seats in Congress in California. It's all gerrymandered. And we have an opportunity in Texas to pick up 5 seats. We have a really good governor, and we have good people in Texas. And I won Texas. I got the highest vote in the history of Texas, as you probably know. and we are entitled to 5 more seats.
I don't know. I have to check on that, and you know they expect.
Check it.
Yeah,
Why don't you check it, Brian?
No, the fact checkers expect us to check everything you say on the phone.
I want you to
but
check
for
it. I
4
don't say
years, those
anything
fact
to you
checkers
that's wrong.
didn't fact check anything that was said about. We don't need to relitigate that either. But they expect fact checking
Joe, why don't you
immediately.
check it, okay? Because
Okay.
I'd like you to. I got the highest vote in the history of Texas, okay? By a lot.
Mr. President,
Yeah.
can I ask you back to the economy and just on some of the things we've seen with the jobs report, the weakness in those numbers that came out last week? People are trying to figure out where the weakness is coming from. Part of it may be because of immigration. Now, people voted you into office because they were concerned about immigration policy in this country. But if you look at the jobs report last week, it did show a 1.7 million drop-off of foreign-born workers from March to July. And
That's a great number, by the way. That's a great number. Because it means we're putting Americans to work.
Well, the problem is immigrants have accounted for more than half of the U.S. workforce growth over the last 3 years. And so you wonder if that gets into an issue. And I know you've spoken with farmers who have had concerns about being able to find temporary workers there.
That's right.
And I think their pleas have kind of hit you in a way where you looked at that a little differently.
Well, I think this. We're getting the criminals out of our country because they had an open border policy because they were fools, and they allowed people from prisons and gang members and drug dealers into our country. We're getting the criminals out of our country by the thousands, and they're taken. We have murderers. We have people that are mentally insane. They come out of insane asylums and psych wards, and they come out of places that you don't want to know about. You would not like to see it. But they dumped everybody in our country, from the Congo in Africa to all over South America. They dumped millions of people into our country that are dangerous people, and I'm getting them out. I'm working with the farmers, however, and the farmers have been great. I also got the highest vote for farmers, I think, that anybody's ever gotten. And I take care of the farmers. I love the farmers. They're a very important part of this country. And we're not going to do anything to hurt the farmers, and we're working on that, and we're going to be coming out with rules and regulations. I mean, you'll see a farmer with the same person working for him for 20 years. The person's even paying taxes and other things. And we're looking for the criminals, the people that murdered. You know, we have 11,888 people that came into our country under Biden, with our great czar, a border czar. She never called one. You know, she was a border czar. She never went to the border, and she never made one call to the Border Patrol. You know, other than that, she did a great job. But they had hundreds of people that were murderers, 11,888 murders, 50% of which murdered more than one person in our country. We've already gotten a lot of them out, and some of them are so dangerous we don't want to bring them back. We want to put them in our own prison because we don't want them coming back. But they allowed 11,888 murderers, many of which murdered more than one, into our population, and we're getting them out rapidly.
But, Mr. President, I just want to hear you clearly. You're saying the people who have been here for years and who have been even paying taxes, you're going to look at them very differently, and maybe they belong here in the workforce?
I want to work with them, and in some cases we're sending them back to their country with a pass back in legally, and we're doing things that are very difficult to do and very complex, but it works really well. We're sending them back, and then they're schooling, they're learning, they're coming in legally. We have a lot of that going on, but we're taking care of our farmers. We can't let our farmers not have anybody, these people, you can't replace them very easily. You know, people that live in the inner city are not doing that work. They're just not doing that work. And they've tried, we've tried, everybody tried. They don't do it. These people do it naturally. I said, what happens if they get it to a farmer the other day? What happens if they get a bad back? He said, they don't get a bad back, sir, because if they get a bad back, they die. I said, that's interesting, isn't it? You know, these are very, you know, in many ways, they're very, very special people. Okay, go ahead.
No, okay, so here we go. So you did get the highest number of votes in Texas, so that's true. But when you were talking about,
then you don't have to say anything more, Joe.
I got to say this.
No, don't say anything more.
No,
don't qualify it by saying.
No, I'm not going to.
The highest number of votes.
You did.
In the
you did. I'm moving on. I'm moving on to your claim that revision helped Biden hurt you for the 800,000. It was in August. There was still plenty of time for voters to see that those weren't
after
real
the
jobs.
election in November,
No.
I believe it was in like
No,
in
this
the
was in
November
August.
something. There was a massive revision downward on
The first
jobs.
one, the
Check it out, Joe. You'll
800,000 or
find I'm right
900,000,
again.
I think was in August, and then later it came out in March of 2025. It went to 598, not 818, but the original
Well,
one.
listen, 598, but there were other revisions downward from prior to the election because the numbers were rigged, okay? And
Okay.
as you said, the number, look, you take a look after the election, how many revisions downward there were. But let's get back to Texas because you said you were going to say
Okay.
something else. I got
No.
the highest vote in the
You did.
history of Texas,
Okay.
a record that they say won't be beaten unless I run again.
Are you going to run again? The
No,
Constitution.
probably not.
Okay.
Probably not.
And you're
I'd
not going
like
to and you're not going to fire Jay Powell. We'll go all talk about all
I'd
the stuff that.
hey, Becky, I'd like to run. I have the best poll numbers I've ever had. You know why? Because people love the tariffs, and
That's
they love
that's
the
with
trade deal, and they
Republicans.
love that countries, and they love that foreign countries aren't ripping us off anymore.
overall
For
poll
years,
numbers-
they ripped us off, friend
No,
and
no.
foe.
Overall
and the friend
poll
was
numbers, you
worse.
don't. Overall
What?
poll numbers, you don't have the best you ever had in overall poll numbers. You do. I cited one of those.
I have the best. I have the best poll
among
numbers I've ever
Republicans.
had.
Among
I have
Republicans.
poll numbers where I'm 71%. I have the best poll numbers. Look,
Those are among Republicans. You know you've got.
No. Among Republicans, I'm at 94 and 95%. No, I'm
Well,
talking
you've
about
got-
generally. I have the. Let me
you've
put
got-
it this way: there was
Okay.
a gentleman on Harry Emden yesterday on CNN, and he went crazy over how well Trump was doing. Now, you don't put that on because I think CBS is a shade. Actually, CNN's a shade better than NBC. I think NBC is probably the worst of them all. But if you check CNN tomorrow, watch Harry Emden, and you'll see about the numbers. But that's okay. We have to defend ourselves, Joe.
I know,
Thank you for
but
texting.
there are other. They can cite. Your haters cite polls that have you down in the 30s, Mr. President. And,
Yeah, but they're fake polls, Joe. I had a lot of fake polls. You also have me in the 70s. I have fake
with
polls. Fox
Republicans.
gives me terrible polls all the time. They do nothing but I've never had a good poll with Fox. And then I win an election and I go through the roof. Because, look, I won every swing state, did I not? I
You
won
did.
every swing state. Andrew, I won the popular vote by millions of votes. Even though they tried like hell to cheat, I won by millions of votes. I won the counties and all of the counties. I won 2,750 to 502. And I won the election in a landslide. And obviously that's only, we're only 6 months in. But my poll numbers are better now, much better than during the election. And now part of that is because the Democrat Party is self-destructing. I mean, when you have low IQ people like Crockett, I wonder if she's any relationship to the late, great Davy Crockett, who was a great gentleman. I wonder if she's got any relationship to Davy Crockett, the great old Davy Crockett. But you have this woman Crockett. She's a very low IQ person. Somebody said the other day she's one of the leaders of the party. I said, you got to be kidding. The Democrats are lost. They have Trump derangement syndrome so bad that they can't walk.
Well,
they can't
that's what I
talk.
mean.
They don't know where they're going. Schumer is finished.
there's
Schumer, look, I watched
40%.
him the other day. He's lost all of his confidence.
40% of the country has. So you're never going to get above 60 in any poll, and it's because 40% have TDS, and we know that. Mr. President, we used to do this every Tuesday. It was called Trump Tuesday. Maybe we can start. This is going to be the start of something again. But we appreciate all your time today, and hope to be able to continue this discussion on all these different issues in the not too distant future, if we could.
Joe, could I finish one thing?
Yes.
1 year
You're the
ago,
president.
1 year ago, our country was dead. Now we have the hottest country anywhere in the world by far. And that was told to me by every leader of NATO, which they do whatever I want. That was told to me by the King of Saudi Arabia, by the leaders of UAE, by the leader of Qatar, by many, many. We were a dead country 1 year ago. Today we're the hottest country anywhere in the world, and I'm very happy to help.
Mr. President, once again, thank you. Thanks for your
Thank you
time.
very much. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome. We'll see you soon. Thank you.
And that is Squawk Pod for today. Thanks for tuning in to this conversation with President Donald Trump. Squawk Box is hosted by Joe Kernan, Becky Quick, and Andrew Ross Sorkin. That's on CNBC weekday mornings beginning at 6 Eastern. Podcast followers, stay tuned to your feeds. Not only do you get the best of our morning show and easy-to-listen-to installments of Squawk Pod, but we will be rolling out some of Andrew's discussions from the Aspen Economic Strategy Group as standalone pods. Keep an ear out for those. That's it. Have a great day, and we'll meet you right back here tomorrow.
We are clear. Thanks, guys.